We can use tools to fight off nature, weapons to fight off people, and other animals. But how do you fight off something that is not even a part of our natural world? Something
paranormal.
What would you do? This story is about a man who was confronted with that question and how he handled it.
He ran.
818 Stories.
This is 818 Stories, where seriously scary stories are told seriously, mostly. If you are new here, please like the video
To pledge allegiance to the algorithm.
This story is from a man who decided to take a night stroll through the woods at 3 in the morning to clear his thoughts, but instead ended up running for his life. There's a twist to this story though, so stick around until the end and see if you're able to make sense of what happened. Here it goes. I have always had trouble sleeping. I've never really cared for sleep anyways. I've always figured there was plenty of time for that when you pass on. After that night in the park though, I think I might have been wrong about that. That night was years ago. I was tossing and turning in bed as usual, having trouble sleeping. I had just gotten out of a relationship, and it had ended in a bad way. This made sleeping more difficult. It kept me up thinking, wondering if things could have been different. Well, on that particular night, I was sick of thinking about it alone in bed, and just got up. It was as if my body had taken over, and said, "Nope, we're not doing this tonight," and started calling the shots for me. I put on my clothes and boots, grabbed my keys, and walked out of my apartment. I lived next to a park, and figured I would just go and walk off my thoughts there. As I walked out my door, my next-door neighbor came walking up the stairs to his apartment. He looked exhausted and a little drunk. I nodded to him in acknowledgement, and he nodded back. We never spoke to each other, but we had interactions like this occasionally. I walked down the steps and over to the park in the distance. The park had lighting around the perimeter, but it was pitch black past there. You weren't supposed to be in the park that late anyways. Regardless, I walked on the park's concrete path into the pitch black and felt the wind on my skin and listened to the trees moving with it. It was refreshing to be wrapped in the dark and quiet, with only the sound of the wind. It felt liberating. Eventually, my eyes had adjusted. The moonlight helped a bit, and I was able to see a small trail branching off the concrete path and leading into the trees. Impulsively, I walked onto it and into the trees. This wasn't normal for me. Sure, I enjoyed walking in the woods, but never deep in the woods alone at night. It was eerie. I walked the trail a little while and then noticed something interesting. There was a drop-off into a huge ditch with a bunch of tires and other junk littered around. Feeling a little adventurous, I said, "Screw it," and climbed down into it. I lost my footing though and fell backward, landing on my back. The fall wasn't too far, but it was enough to knock the wind out of me. I got up cursing and dusting myself off. I stood there for a while, collecting myself, thinking. I decided I'd lay down and look up at the night sky. But then, as I started to lay down, I heard the bushes above the ditch rustle loudly. I turned around toward the sound and it stopped abruptly. I felt a little uncomfortable, but thought it might have been a critter of some kind. I turned back around to lay down, but then the bushes shook again. This time faster. I shot straight up onto my feet and looked at them, shaking, trying to make out what was happening in the darkness. And then a man jumped out of the bushes down into the ditch. He landed on his feet and looked right at me, with no expression on his face. At this point, I thought I was about to get robbed or attacked or something. But I started to remind myself that people must go into parks after hours all the time. What were his reasons, though? I took a small step back and said to him, "Oh hey, I'm sorry. Is this your spot?" I thought maybe he was homeless and lived there, or maybe, I don't know. It's just what I said. He didn't speak for a while. He stood there, looking at me expressionless. He looked like a young guy. He had a plain red hoodie on and medium brown hair. He looked average in every way except there was an odd glow about him. It was like a faint purple or blue glow came off of him. His skin was very pale too. I chalked it up to the moonlight. He shot a stare at me that was very intense and asked,
How long have you been here?
I told him I had just gotten there and that I was just walking out. He was quiet again. I asked him his name. No response. I began to think of something I could say to make an exit, but then he said this.
I've been here a long time.
I was starting to get a little uncomfortable with the way he spoke and his lack of expression. It looked as if he wasn't even breathing. I responded to him. Oh yeah? How long? Again, he did not respond. Okay, I thought. This dude is a little off. Or maybe he's on something. It's time for me to leave. I turned toward the wall of the ditch to climb out and said to him, "All right, man, have a good night." Again, nothing. I was starting to get a little annoyed with his quiet nature. I began to pull myself out of the ditch, but then I heard his feet smacking the ground. He was running at me. I panicked and fell back down into the ditch and landed on my back. I scrambled to get to my feet. As soon as I was up, I heard the bushes he had previously emerged from rustle around. What the hell? He wasn't next to me. He was gone. How the hell did he get back over to that side of the ditch, climb out, and run into the bushes that fast? I didn't wait around to think about it. Now, I'm freaked out. I climbed out of that ditch quickly and ran back into the woods the way I originally came. I stopped momentarily to listen for him and to make sure I wasn't being followed, but then I heard the craziest fit of laughter. I had heard people in my life who were under the influence of drugs or just nuts laugh similar to this before. This topped all of them. The laughing was coming from the direction of the ditch. I then heard feet smacking the ground of the forest. It was coming right toward me. I booked it. Fear got the better of me, and one slight turn to my left threw off all sense of direction. I'm really starting to slip up at this point, as this maniac is chasing me. I turned to look behind me while running. Stupid to do in the dark, I know, because then, while running as fast as I could, I slammed right into a tree and fell to the ground. I could tell the impact had hurt, but adrenaline masked the pain. I got up disoriented and just started running. As I was running, I began to hear what I can only describe as like an oohing sound from the man. Its direction didn't make any sense. It sounded like each one he made was zeroed in on me, growing louder and louder each time it came closer to me, and then restarting, and then coming closer to me again, over and over. It's not glamorous, but I started to yell. No, scream. I was actually screaming in terror. I'd never known what that had felt like. My mind felt like one huge alarm going off. I ran as fast as I could in the dark, bumping into what seemed like every goddamn tree there was. But then, finally, I saw one of the park's lights through the trees. That meant it had to be the perimeter. I was close to the edge of the forest and about to pass through the tree line when my feet suddenly gave out from under me. I fell forward, hitting the ground. As I did, I heard that crazy laughter again. I was terrified, but I was also getting furious at all of this. Flight had shifted to fight. Whoever this guy was, I was going to smack the shit out of him. I picked myself up and made it out into the park's field. A park light was maybe 50 yards away now. I turned to face the tree line though. I knew he was chasing me, so I thought I'd be ready to intercept him and use the little bit of energy I had left to take him. But there was no more laughter or the sound of his feet hitting the ground. It was quiet and the air felt still. That anger started to slowly wear off and go back to fear. I turned to make it back to the apartment and realized I had exited the forest on the other side of the park. I would have to walk all the way back through the park to make it back where I entered. As I'm trying to figure out what to do next, I noticed something. No, someone. It was him. The man in the red hoodie was standing under the park light and staring right at me. I don't know how he managed to get ahead of me. I should have seen him. Well, that anger I previously had was now gone. At that point, I felt like I was about to piss myself. Wait, what's that feeling around my crotch? Is that blood or... Nope. I had pissed myself. I called out to him. Just leave me alone, man. I'm f***ing leaving. Silence again. He was standing under the light staring at me. I was a mixed bag of all sorts of the worst kinds of emotions. I yelled, "F*** you, man. Leave me alone." I was surprised when I heard a response. "Are you high? What the hell are you even doing?" I realized that the person standing under the light wasn't even the man who was chasing me. It was just someone else who happened to be wearing a red hoodie. I couldn't quite make out his features. I just called back to him in response. "I'm sorry." "Nothing." He didn't say anything. I walked at an angle toward the park's exit to avoid him. At this point, my plans to make it back to the road and figure out how to make it back to the apartment from there. There was no way in hell I was going to walk back through there. I was thinking how I'd never walk anywhere ever again, but boy, I sure would have a story to tell my friends when they were in town. We'd have a drink, and I'd share this with them, and they'd think it was so. The loudest and craziest scream I ever heard came from that man standing under the park light. He started to sprint toward me. I screamed and ran as fast as I could to make it out of the park. I couldn't see him, but he was getting closer, too close. I saw the sidewalk in the parking lot. I'd make my way out onto the street and flag someone down for help. The man was now right behind me with his crazy laughter and screams, his feet slamming on the ground as he got closer. I ran through the parking lot and out past the sidewalk and onto the street. I started shouting for help. There were no cars. I turned to prepare myself to be attacked by this man or this thing, but there was nothing there. It was hard to stand. I was trembling. I felt like my feet were going to give out from under me again. It suddenly occurred to me to check my pocket for my phone. I needed to call someone for help. It wasn't there. I had left it at the apartment. That was not uncommon for me, but damn, I would never make that mistake again if I survived this. I recognized the area, and the walk wouldn't be too far, but I was worried that that man or thing in the park would appear again. I did manage to walk home without an issue though. I unlocked the door to my apartment and went into the bathroom. I took off my clothes to check for injuries and to get the piss-stained pants off. I was pretty badly bruised from hitting the tree and from falling into the ditch. I had cuts and scrapes as well. Other than that, I was okay. I'd left my dirty clothes on the bathroom floor. I'd deal with those tomorrow. I needed to sleep. I took a quick, hot shower and got into my bed. Then, something really strange happened. For the first time in a very long time, I fell right asleep with no issue. When morning came, I got up and went straight to the bathroom to retrieve my dirty clothes. They weren't there. While I was looking around for them, I noticed myself in the mirror. What the hell? I had no cuts or bruises. It must have been a crazy dream, I thought. I could remember every detail of that night, but everything was as I left it. My boots were even in the same spot. I was beyond confused. I couldn't shrug this off though. That was too real to have been a dream, I thought. I put on some clothes and decided to go back to the park in the daylight to see if I could make sense of any of this. Maybe the layout wouldn't match, and then I'd have confirmation that this was just some crazy dream. I walked outside the apartment and locked my door. My neighbor's door opened though. He yawned as he walked out with a key in hand and looked over at me. He shut his door and put a hand on his forehead. He looked miserable. He said to me, "Hey, sorry to bother you. Do you have any BC powder or ibuprofen?" I had seen him when I had left my apartment during the night, so I figured I would ask him if he saw me last night when he was coming up the stairs. If he didn't know what I was talking about, then I would know for a fact that this was some sort of crazy dream. I said to him, "Yeah, man, I have both." He replied, "Oh, thank you so much, dude. I had a bit too much last night." Before I went to grab him his medicine, I said, "Hey, this is going to sound strange, but I'm trying to figure something out. Did we see each other out here last night at like 3 in the morning?" He nodded and said, "Yeah, I think so. I was a little out of it, but I think I saw you walk out of your apartment when I got back." Sometimes fear can feel like ice in your veins when it's really bad. This was one of those times. What the hell was going on? I described to him what I was wearing, and he had confirmed it. I didn't tell him why I was asking, and I could tell he was eager to get the medicine from me, so I dropped it. When I went back into my apartment to get the medicine, I decided I would not be going back to the park that day or any day after that. Years have passed since then, and I've told my buddies. They all have their different conclusions as to what really happened, but I will never forget that experience. Something happened that night, but I can't make sense of it. The two conclusions are either I didn't leave the apartment and my neighbor was just too drunk to really remember if he saw me or not, or that I had left the apartment and been chased by 2 different people in red hoodies, and that my memory was just simply distorted from a lack of sleep. Maybe I didn't piss myself, although I do remember it vividly. Maybe I put my boots back, washed my clothes, dried them, and put them back while half asleep and just didn't remember it. It seems bizarre to think that's the case, but even considering that my experience was the true reality of the situation was much more bizarre, and honestly, terrifying. Something that's strange about it all is, since then, I have had no issue sleeping. I also make sure to take my phone with me every time I step outside the door. I do not walk in the woods alone, and being in the woods in general messes with me after that night. I'm just glad I'm okay. I was right about this though. That night does make for one hell of a story. That concludes his story, and I have to agree, it is a good story. What do you think though? Do you agree with his friends that there's a simple explanation, or did he have a real encounter with something
Paranormal.
Let me know down in the comments what you think happened. Also, if you would like your story to be shared on this channel, please email me at 818stories@gmail.com. I'm a small channel, so if it's a good story, the chances of me using it are high. I also respect your privacy and will leave out your name and any other descriptive details if that is a concern of yours. Just let me know in the email. If you haven't already, please subscribe for more stories, released weekly, sometimes bi-weekly. Until next time, be careful in the woods and have a great day.
Because it could be your last.
Please like, comment, and subscribe.